Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again to another episode of Feed the Beast Revelation. Dang it. So I'm bumping the walls back a couple pixels, as I mentioned during last episode. A lot of you reassured me that Chisel and Bits is actually extraordinarily well performing, which I was pretty confident of already, but it was good to have confirmation of that. So I do think that helps a little bit to give that little bit of extra depth, especially around the pillars, though it does introduce a few other problems. So first up, we have this little lip down here at the bottom. Now, we could just push that in, but then we would have a gap where the water couldn't flow in, obviously. We could raise the water level up. We could fill this up with like Chisel and Bits water, but then we would still have the water flowing texture on the side. So I think we need to leave that lip there. I'll probably try and build something up above it, some kind of support or something to disguise the bottom of the wall, make it look a little bit better. We'll see what ends up happening with that. Obviously, we still have quite a long ways to go with our wall in general. We still have a bunch of pipes to add in. We want to add our walkway all along the top. That itself needs to get reworked. And there's a few other little details. For example, the crack in the wall that I tried out with like the stairs and the slabs. It turns out you can't Chisel and Bits stairs. Game? Hello? Yeah, I didn't realize that was a thing. Maybe I'm just missing something, because that seems like kind of a weird thing to not be able to do. But I was not able to, chisel away at these things. So I could always just make normal cracks through the wall using exclusively Chisel and Bits. Like I did experiment with that a little bit here, like having kind of a cracked bit where the water was seeping in. So that may be what I have to do in order to pull that off. But if there's a way to chisel stairs, be sure to let me know, because that does seem like something it should be able to do. It's a little bit strange that it can't, but maybe that's just not worked in yet. Who knows? Anyway, we will return to this wall another time. Like I said, there's plenty to do, all of the stuff I mentioned, and of course I want to change this liquid out for something like a darker green and have it really swirl out into the water and all that good stuff. But for today, we're going to focus on something a little bit different. And that is to jump into a new mod. Now, it's going to be a new mod for me, and a new mod for the series, but probably not a new mod for the vast majority of you guys, because this is one of the kind of golden standard mods that everyone uses when they play modded Minecraft. I'm speaking, of course, of Botania. Now, for the uninitiated, all two of you, I assume, Botania is, by its own definition, a tech mod disguised as a magic mod. So, when you think of a tech mod, there's kind of a general progression that comes to mind. You generate power, and then you use that power to make your life easier. You use it to provide you with some kind of benefit. That is exactly how Botania works. The only difference is, instead of generating power, say generating RF with a solar panel, you're instead using magical flowers to generate something called mana. And then you take that mana and you use it to do all kinds of fancy stuff. So if we open up the Lexica Botania, this is the manual for the mod, and you can craft that just by putting a sapling along with a book. This is more or less everything you need to know for Botania. It's not every single detail. There's a few little things missing, at least that I've seen so far, but it does give you a pretty good idea. And there is a lot of stuff that this mod can do. In fact, if we go ahead and click on the lexicon index down here, this is a decent list of the majority of the stuff. And as you can see, there's a lot to it. Everything from new tools and weapons and armor, various blocks that allow you to do kind of interesting stuff, like this third eye allows you to see mobs through walls, I believe. All kinds of interesting abilities that you can get from that. There's also stuff to help with farming, to make crops grow faster, or to help you with your breeding animals. All of that good stuff. So we're probably going to want to work Botania into our base area quite a lot because it has a lot of unique applications. It can make it so we can do things in really interesting ways. So I'm looking forward to that, but before we get to that point, obviously we need to tackle the basics of the mod. Now, in order to do that, the first thing we need to do is set out on a bit of an adventure to find the 16 different types of mystical flowers that generate around the world. There's one of these for each of the dye types in normal Minecraft, and they're relatively easy to spot because they're always emitting particles. They've got kind of a little glow to them. So, they're not too hard to find, but it may be tricky to find all 16. Thankfully, there is a quicker solution to that, provided to us by Botania, and that is the floral fertilizer, made by combining 1 bone meal, 2 red dye, and 2 yellows. That will allow us to have a special type of bone meal that we can use, and that's going to just generate Botania flowers for us. That way, if we're too lazy to go adventuring, we can find all of the flowers right in our own front yard. So now that we have every single type of flower from Botania, we're pretty much good to go. Obviously, we don't need every single one to start, it's just kind of convenient for the future. The one type that we really do need in order to get started in Botania, though, is the white mystical flower that I'm holding here. Now, the mystical flowers in general aren't too useful on their own. You can only do 2 real things with them. One, you can combine them with glowstone to make glowing flowers to use as a light source, which is pretty cool actually, very neat way to light up your outdoor areas. But we can also turn them into petals, just like so. And that's going to give us 2 mystical white petals. Now, obviously, just having 2 petals doesn't sound like very much, and it's actually not going to get us very far. But thankfully, it is quite easy to actually expand the number of them that we have once we have a few to start with. So the petals themselves can actually be planted down on the ground. You can see these little glittering spots that we put down. And we can bone meal those to get tall, mystical white flowers. And of course, this works with all of the other mystical flowers as well. Now, these you cannot break with your hand. If you do, the entire flower's gone, you've destroyed it. You have to break these off with a shear, and then you get the 2 tall versions in your inventory. You put each of those in, and each one of those is going to give you 4 petals in return. So, with the 2 we started with, we just got 8 mystical white petals, which of course we could put down again, like so. Bone meal all of these, and then shear these, and craft them once more, and now suddenly we have 32 petals. So at this point we should be good to go. Obviously we can duplicate these all day long. We can also turn these into dyes, which I've done in the past. Let's see, where is it? Somewhere in here, right here, floral white powder. If we would combine this with a pestle and mortar, this would actually turn into a dye. And we could use this on wool or just anywhere that could generally use dye, in fact. So that's a really easy way to get different colors of dye for some of the trickier ones. But for right now, we're mostly focused on the actual Botania uses of this. So in order to take full advantage of these petals and actually do something interesting with them, we're going to need a petal apothecary. So the apothecary is a fairly simple thing to craft. Just takes a bit of cobblestone, some cobble slabs, and a petal of any kind. So there we go. And the apothecary is a pretty simple little contraption. It does take a bit of water. Kind of looks like a bird bath now. And essentially what this does is it allows us to craft things using the different petals. So if we go ahead and drop one of our petals in here, you'll see when we mouse over this, we get this little icon on our screen, this right here, and we can also see the petal kind of floating around in there. If we were to right-click with an empty hand, or shift-right-click rather, we'd pull that back out. So if you throw something in accidentally, you can always pull it out. The petals, though, we're going to go ahead and throw 4 of those in, and now you'll see this extra little bit over here. It shows us that if we add in seeds, we're going to get this flower as a result. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's chuck in a seed, and that has given us a pure daisy. Now, if we go ahead and fill this back up with water, because it does use up the water each time you make something in it, and of course, you can automate the process of refilling this. But as you can see, it says right-click with an empty hand to add back the last recipe. So that just means that all we have to do is right-click, and now all of the petals were pulled out of our inventory and we're ready to craft again. So it's not too hard to automatically craft a bunch of different stuff with this. Pretty neat. Let's go ahead and put our water back in here. So now we have 2 of these pure daisies. Let's go ahead and pop those down. So these serve a very, very important purpose within the Botania mod. These are how you craft some very, very critical blocks that we need for, well, quite a lot of stuff, actually. Now, what we do is we surround these with stone or wood, and a few other blocks work as well, but stone and wood are the important ones. And you'll see that they start glittering. Now, about 1 minute from now, those blocks, in the order that I place them down in, are actually going to start transforming into a new type of block. And those new types of blocks are living rock and living wood. These are critical blocks for Botania. They're used for all kinds of things, and on top of that, they even can be used in building. They actually have a lot of really cool looking variants. If we turn the living wood into planks and the living rock into bricks, they actually look really, really good. So we may actually want to use these as building materials even. So that does mean we're going to want to automate this process probably sooner rather than later. For the time being, though, I think we'll be good just making things manually. Let's go ahead and pick this stuff up, and let's actually go ahead and put down another set, because we are going to need more of this stuff relatively quickly. So I'll go ahead and throw down a bit more. Obviously, we could put these in any order. We can mix and match them. Doesn't really matter. But now that that's in place, and now that we have a little bit to start with, let's go ahead and start crafting some of the stuff that Botania wants us to use. So the first thing we want to do is create a mana spreader. So if we go ahead and search for one of those, it's a relatively simple recipe. It just takes 1 petal, 6 living wood, and a gold ingot. You can actually craft that up nice and quick. And we're also going to want a mana pool. Again, relatively simple, just 5 living rock. So, these 2 blocks in tandem are kind of the basis for Botania, or at least a kind of a good starting point for it. Let's see, where do I want this? I'll just put it right here. So, essentially what this is going to do is the mana spreader is going to shoot mana into our mana pool, and the mana pool is just going to hold on to it for us. And remember that mana is the kind of energy source of Botania. Should probably go ahead and sleep. So, we want to build up that mana. It's important, it's obviously what Botania is based off of, and it's how we get pretty much anything done. So at this point, we need to start generating mana. And there's a few different options we have here in early game, but honestly, there's not many that are good, right? We have kind of limited options, as you would kind of expect when you're first starting out. That being said, the options that we do have aren't all that bad. So, the first one that we have, and the one that we're going to go with, is the Endo Flame. The alternative is hydrangeas, and we'll talk about those momentarily, but the Endo Flame takes 2 brown, 1 red, and 1 light gray, and then as you can see, it wants seeds once again, and that's going to give us the Endo Flame, obviously. So, let's actually go ahead and craft up a few of those. Inventory management. So we go. Craft up another one of those, and I think I'm going to want 4 to start with. So, like so, and then 1 more. And there we go. Looking good. So now we have 4 of these Endo Flames. So what do these do? Well, essentially, you place these down, and these are automatically going to see the mana spreader over here, and as soon as these start generating mana, because that's what these are, they're mana generating flowers, they're going to start pushing the mana to the mana spreader, which is going to automatically start sending it over to our mana pool. So how do we fuel these? Well, this particular type of flower is actually fueled by, well, fuel. So if we go ahead and throw it a little bit of coal blocks, we'll go ahead and throw 4 in there, so each flower will automatically pick 1 up. These are now pulling in the coal blocks, they're burning it, kind of like a furnace, and that is generating the mana that's going into the spreader and being shot into our pool. Pretty awesome. The other option that we would have for this here at the beginning would be hydrangeas, and hydrangea, how do you, I don't even know how they're, hydrangeas? I don't know. But essentially those flowers you would place down around water sources, and they would basically pull energy from it, and it would generate energy a lot slower than the Endo Flames do, and the flowers also break after an hour. So they're not quite as expensive in regards to needing to supply them with fuel, but they're not as quick nor as, hands-off. So I think Endo Flames are kind of the better solution here at the beginning. Anyway, now that we have this up and running, well, it's kind of hard to tell what's going on, right? We have no idea how much mana is being put in here, we have no idea how fast mana is generating, and in order to fix that, we actually want to create something called the Wand of the Forest. Now, in order to do that, I do need a little bit more living wood, because the Wand of the Forest does require that, and we're going to want to create a couple of these living wood twigs. So we're going to go ahead and put those in diagonally, and put in a couple petals. Any 2 colors will work. The colors of the petals do reflect on the wand itself, so if you want to be fancy, you can worry about that. But now that we have the Wand of the Forest, we actually can tell what is all happening. You can see as we mouse over things, we get all kinds of little information. While we're holding this wand, we get this extra little beam going through here to show us where the spreader is going to be shooting. We can also do things like change the mode on the mana pool, which we'll talk about shortly. So all of this is going on. If we hold down right-click as we're looking at something, we can see the bars filling up, because the mod doesn't constantly update things for the sake of, preventing lag. But each time we right-click, it's going to update it. You can see that our mana spreader fills up really quickly and then shoots out all the mana that it builds up. And our mana pool doesn't look like it's filling up very quickly, but that's because this thing holds a ton of mana. So even though these things are generating a decent amount, at least for early game Botania, it really doesn't look like it's doing a whole lot. Don't worry though, this is going to be plenty for what we need to do. That being said, it does take a little while for this early game mana setup to actually generate a decent amount of mana, so I'm going to let this go for a couple minutes, and I'll be back with you guys when we're ready to actually create our first Botania items. So I've thrown quite a bit of coal into the system, and we have a decent amount of mana now. We should have plenty enough to actually get done what I want to today. Now, the main reason that I actually was trying to do Botania today, the main reason I wanted to set this stuff up, even though we don't have a proper Botania building yet, is because I wanted to get some new armor. So Botania has several tiers of armor. The first one is relatively easy to get, and we already have everything we need to make it happen. In particular, all we really need is a mana pool with some mana in it, and some iron ingots. So the mana pool itself is actually a crafting mechanic. It stores our mana for us, and that's useful for all kinds of things, but we can also throw items into it, and specific types of items will actually give us a mana-infused version back. One such item is iron ingots. So iron ingots, if we throw them in here, you can see we get this little image here that shows we get a check mark, and it's going to turn our iron ingots into a Manasteel ingot. So we throw that in, we get one of them, we throw in a whole stack, and it'll start churning them out, which looks amazing. So there we go. Now we have half a stack of Manasteel. Suppose I should sleep. And that Manasteel, like regular iron, can be turned into a set of armor. Now, Manasteel armor isn't actually all that great. It's, comparable to iron, actually. Maybe a little bit better, but that's pretty much it. Chest, please, helmet, boots, and legs. There we go. Let's get this garbage off and equip this. Oops. And wow. I never actually looked at what this looked like in game before. That is quite interesting looking, actually. And it kind of reminds me of old school MMO armor, like early tier sets from Warcraft or something like that. Kind of cool. I like it. So, as I was saying, Manasteel armor isn't actually all that great. It's kind of flashy looking, but it's not actually that much better than iron armor is. That being said, I think it's going to do pretty good for the time being. I didn't want to bump up automatically to like the best armor or anything like that. I wanted to experiment with the different levels, and for now, I think this will do. At least until we start getting into some of the more crazy, challenging stuff. So, I think this is pretty cool. This armor does have one other interesting property to it, though. Something beyond just being a little bit better than iron. And of course, we can enchant it on top of that. But it does have one interesting property to it, and this is something that's kind of universal across most Botania stuff. And that's that it can be charged up using mana. And in this case, all it really does is replenish the durability. So our armor here will take durability damage. In fact, it doesn't even have very high durability to begin with. So we need a constant source of mana to keep the durability up. In order to do that, we're going to want to create something called a mana tablet. So the mana tablet does take a bit of living rock, 8 living rock, and either a mana pearl or a mana diamond. So mana pearls and diamonds are made much the same way as Manasteel. If we go ahead and throw an ender pearl in here, we're going to get a mana pearl back. And the living rock, obviously we made some over there. We still have a little bit left here. Now we can go ahead and craft that up, and that's going to give us the mana tablet, which we can fill up with mana inside of our mana pool just by throwing it in, as long as it's set the right way. So currently you can see here we have the little mana tablet icon, and it shows an arrow going into the pool. This means that a mana tablet thrown into it would empty out into the pool. Whereas if we shift right click it this way, now it will empty into a tablet from the pool. So if we threw our tablet in there, it would automatically fill up. But I don't really want to do that, because the tablet itself, while very useful for Botania, and of course for future stuff from Botania as well, all of the fancy items and tools and whatnot will also drain the tablet when they need to. But I don't like that it wastes an inventory slot. And there is a solution for that, and that is the Band of Mana. So the Band of Mana, let's actually go over here to the crafting table, is basically a ring that encompasses the effects of the mana tablet. It's basically merging the mana tablet into a little ring. So we can go ahead and craft that quick, take up 4 more of our Manasteel ingots. And we can chuck that into our mana pool, and you'll see the mana, hopefully, zap into it in a very cool fashion. And now we have just a little bit of mana here in our band of mana. And up here we have something called a bauble, or rather a bauble slot. That is basically 8 extra inventory slots where we can drop in certain kinds of trinkets. So we popped our ring in there. Now that's just out of our way, not clogging up our inventory, and we still have a nice source of mana for whenever we need it, including to replenish our armor. So at this point, we've got a nice set of armor, but it does come with one slight problem. And that's that, well, we no longer have our slime boots on. That means that we're going to start taking fall damage. And due to the way that I've been playing, because I've gotten used to having those slime boots, that's probably going to lead to a bit of a problem. So, that being said, I think it's about time we acquire a better way of getting around. And there's a few different ways we could do this. We covered different means of flight earlier on, but I think at this point, especially because we're hopefully going to start building like really actively soon, I think I want to try out like 1 or 2 more build styles before I really dive into that. But hopefully we're going to start really actively building soon, and having creative mode flight would be a huge help for that. So there's a few different ways we could get creative mode flight, and there's some really, really impressive ways we could do it as well. But for today, I think we're just going to go with a relatively straightforward, kind of typical means of doing it, and that should hold us over pretty well for the time being. In order to do that, we're going to pursue something called the Angel Ring. Now, we've looked at this a little bit before. It's from Extra Utilities 2. It honestly isn't too hard to make, but it does take a couple steps and a few resources. So I'm going to go ahead and get prepared to craft all of that and get all of that sorted out. And, well, I'll be back with you guys when we're ready to fly. Okay, so that was quite a trip. It did cost me a life, unsurprisingly, to fall damage, which I could have guessed was going to happen. But, well, I think at this point I have everything I need for our ring, so that shouldn't be a problem going forward. Now, I did also expand out our grid power system, because the rings we're going to be creating do use grid power, and we needed more. So, just temporarily, I threw down a couple extra water mills. Hello, lag. This watermill system here is actually going to be one of the first things we put into a dedicated structure. I think we're going to make a proper GP area and a proper grid power building, and I think I have a pretty good idea of what I want to do with that. But for the time being, this setup will do. Let's actually go ahead and make our rings. So the first step in this process is going to be to make something called the chicken wing ring. Just like so. Oh, it actually gives us our golden lasso back. I did not realize. That's handy. So, essentially what this ring does, as long as it's in our inventory or in our bauble slots, is this gives us a way to slow fall. So, anytime we're falling, if we hold space, it's going to allow us to kind of glide down to the ground really, really slowly. So, this already fixes our falling to our death problem, right? It makes that not really an issue. So, that's cool. But, obviously we can go a bit better than that. So the next step to this is to upgrade to the Ring of the Flying Squid, which, of course, we need to bring the items out for. So the Ring of the Flying Squid, more lassos. This one is much the same, but this does give us a little bit of flight, as you can see. So now we can fly, but we have a limited duration. You can see by that bar down at the kind of covering up where our XP bar would be, or a little above it, rather. So that's kind of cool by itself. It's really nice to be able to fly around like that, and that by itself would be honestly good enough for me at this point. But, well, we may as well go full Monty and go straight up to the angel ring right here. So in order to do that, I'm going to pull these out. This last step does take a cursed lasso with a ghast in it, which is what killed me. You have to take a ghast down to like really low health and then manage to capture them in this lasso. You can't capture them at a full health like you could with the golden lasso. So yeah, pretty nasty. But, well, here we go. Now we have... Oh, we got our cursed lasso back too. Sweet. But now we have our angel ring. And we can also put like different wing versions on that. If we go ahead and combine it with feathers or pink dye or leather, it'll give us specialized little wings, which for some reason... Oh, they're gone now. Well, we had those wings earlier. I think that's what they were from. I think that experimenting in a creative world, like, stuck them on my character or something. Anyway, let's go ahead and drop this into our bauble slot. And now... Da-da-da-da! Creative mode flight. Yes. So from now on, we have full-on creative mode flight, as long as we don't overburden our grid power system. And that means that building is just going to be 1,000 times easier. Traveling around is going to be way easier. It's technically a little better to use the glider, but now I can just fly straight up and then glide wherever I need to. And if I need more height, well, I can just, fly back up. So that is super handy. There are still forms of flight that are better than this. There's still an upgraded way that we can do this to make it a bit faster, I believe. I haven't actually double-checked that that's in this pack or not. I think Draconic Evolution also has some flight stuff that might be superior to this. And there's a few other methods that might actually be faster, even if they're technically less useful for building and stuff, but that might be kind of cool for getting around. So we will be experimenting with flight a little bit more in the future, but for right now, I think we're good. So this is going to come in quite handy as we progress on our building and all of that good stuff, which hopefully we'll continue on next time. We'll see how things go. We may also do a little bit of adventuring and testing some other things out now that we have some decent armor and can get around easier. We'll see what we end up doing. But for today, unfortunately, I think I have to call it here. Kind of a rambly episode and a little less productive than I like to be, but, well, we got some important stuff done. We can fly, we have at least okay armor for the time being, it's self-repairing thanks to Botania's mana system, lots of cool stuff. Next episode we'll try and be a little bit more, well, productive. We'll see how it goes. But for today, I think I'm going to call it here. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. Hopefully you enjoyed the little preview into Botania. I think this is going to be a big part of our base area, and we definitely are going to have at least 1 or 2 buildings that really tie in heavily to this system. And I think we're going to be able to do some cool stuff with it. Could even use it to like break blocks or move things around, all kinds of fancy things. So that'll be fun. Lots of cool stuff in the future. But for today, like I said, going to have to call it here. So that being said, thank you guys for watching. I hope you have an amazing day, and I'll see you next time.